Have you ever been faced with a moment where duty and compassion collided? Where everything you've been trained for, every rule you've sworn to uphold, is suddenly challenged by something far more profound? For 15 years, I stood as a royal guard, a silent sentinel of tradition. Never did I imagine that one ordinary morning at Buckingham Palace would redefine my understanding of duty itself. The morning sun, it was just like any other at first, casting that gentle golden light across the palace grounds, catching the gleam on my tunic buttons. 15 years. 15 years I'd served. 2 tours in Afghanistan etched into my memory, and each day I perfected the art of stillness. You become a statue in scarlet, unwavering, yet your senses are anything but dormant. Every whisper of conversation, every shuffle of feet on the gravel, the subtle shifts in the crowd's energy, it all registers. You have to be aware, acutely aware. It's part of the duty, part of what makes you a royal guard, and it was this heightened awareness that first drew my attention to them. A small family, making their way through the gathering crowd of tourists. The parents, they moved with a particular kind of care, the kind you see when people are guarding something truly precious. And between them, this little girl. Couldn't have been more than 7, I'd guess. Her face was pale, drawn even, but her eyes were wide with wonder, taking in the sheer magnificence of the palace. But it wasn't just her excitement that caught my eye. It was the brightly colored knitted beanie pulled down snugly over her head. And, well, it was clear, even from a distance, that there was no hair beneath it. The way her parents supported her, so gently, almost as if she were made of glass. And yet, despite that fragility, there was a spark in her eyes, a determined brightness that spoke of a spirit far, far stronger than her small body suggested. "Mommy, look!" Her voice, though soft, carried with a child's clear enthusiasm. "He's so tall, and his uniform is so red." Her innocent joy drew smiles from those nearby, the usual tourist smiles. But I saw how quickly those smiles change, how they soften into something else. Quiet concern. A young mother, kneeling to answer her own daughter's whispered question. "Sweetie," she explained, her voice reaching my trained ears. "Sometimes people get very sick." Her words hung in the air. "That's why we should be extra kind." Stage 4, I heard another tourist murmur to his companion. "Poor thing." Then, the father's voice closer now. She wanted to see the royal guard. The rest of the sentence faded, lost in a sympathetic shake of the head. But through it all, through the hushed whispers and concerned glances, her eyes remained fixed on my post. Pure, unadulterated excitement. An excitement that illness, whatever it was, couldn't dim. I saw her parents exchange a look then, over her head. A look I recognized. I'd seen it in military hospitals, in the eyes of families facing impossible odds. A look of love, of fear, and that desperate, heart-wrenching desire to protect someone they knew, deep down, they couldn't save. "Not too close now, Emily," her father cautioned gently as they approached, his voice catching slightly. "Remember what we talked about? The guards have very important duties." I could see his hand tighten around hers, small hand and large. Emily nodded, so solemnly, but her eyes, they sparkled with barely contained joy. "I know, Daddy," she said, pronouncing each word carefully, as if it were precious. "They protect the Queen and the palace, and hundreds of years of tradition." The last word, tradition, she said it with such importance, like it was a lesson she'd been practicing, just for this moment. Despite her obvious weakness, her enthusiasm seemed to give her strength. She moved closer, small determined steps, her parents' hands a constant, gentle support. The morning crowd, it was like they sensed something special was happening. They parted naturally, creating a little pocket of space around them, an unspoken acknowledgement of this very personal visit. "She's been talking about this for weeks," her mother explained quietly to an elderly woman who'd asked about Emily. "The doctor said." Her voice dropped even lower, but I heard every word, my hearing trained for far more than just polite conversation. They said we should do it soon, while she still has the strength. It's her biggest wish. The elderly woman dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. God bless her, she whispered, watching Emily's face light up as she saw my bearskin cap. Such a brave little thing. Other tourists had noticed now. A group of Japanese visitors lowered their cameras. Respectfully, a tall American man in a business suit quickly wiped his eyes before pulling out his phone, showing pictures of his own daughters back home to his wife. Parents throughout the crowd, drawing their children closer, some explaining in hushed tones about kindness, about empathy, while others simply watched, a silent understanding passing between them. Look at his medals, Daddy. Emily's voice, clear and full of genuine admiration, carried across the courtyard. Do you think he got them for being brave? Her own courage, facing what she was facing. It made the question all the more poignant. Her father's voice was steady, though I could see the emotion in his eyes. I'm sure he did, sweetheart. Just like you're brave. Every day at the hospital, he squeezed her thin shoulder gently. Remember what Dr. Thompson said about your special medal? Emily nodded proudly. He said I'm the bravest patient he's ever had. She touched a small pin on her jacket, clearly a token from her medical team. She wore it with the same reverence, the same quiet pride that I'd seen in my fellow soldiers displaying their combat decorations. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the stone courtyard. I maintained my ceremonial stillness, every muscle disciplined. But my awareness, it was entirely focused on the small family, drawing closer to my post. 15 years I'd stood guard. Through every kind of weather, every type of tourist, countless attempts to break my concentration. But something about Emily's innocent excitement, her obvious struggle, it touched a part of me that all my military training hadn't quite managed to shield. As they got nearer, I could hear more of their quiet conversation. Mommy, did you know the guards have to stand still for hours and hours? That's even longer than when I have to stay still for my treatments. Her mother's reply, gentle, tinged with both pride and heartache. That's right, sweetheart. And you're just as brave as they are. She adjusted Emily's beanie, tenderly, making sure it sat comfortably. A young boy nearby tugged at his father's sleeve. Dad, why doesn't she have any hair? Childlike innocence. The question hung in the morning air. The father knelt beside his son. Sometimes, he replied softly, the bravest warriors fight battles we can't see. That's why we need to be extra kind and respectful. The boy nodded solemnly, then gave Emily a shy wave, which she returned with a bright smile. An older couple had stopped to speak with Emily's parents, their voices low, but clear to my trained ears. Our grandson went through the same thing last year, the woman was saying, her eyes misting over. The strength these children show, it's remarkable. Emily's father's voice, barely a whisper. The doctors gave us 3 months. Emily, oblivious, was admiring the palace architecture. But she's fighting so hard. All she wanted was to see the royal guards. She's watched every video, read every book. Something tightened in my chest then, a sensation I hadn't felt since Afghanistan, since carrying wounded comrades to safety under fire. Through my perfectly maintained forward gaze, I could see Emily's reflection in the palace windows, her face glowing with excitement. Despite the obvious physical fragility, look how straight he stands, Daddy, Emily exclaimed, edging slightly closer, but still maintaining a respectful distance. Just like how Nurse Jenny tells me to sit up straight during my medicine time. Her comparison between my military bearing and her own daily battles, it struck a chord deep within me. The crowd completely silent now, holding their breath collectively. Parents lifting smaller children for a better view, not of me, the guard, but of this brave little girl whose joy radiated through the courtyard. Even the usual London traffic sound seemed to mute, as if the city itself was pausing, witnessing. Emily moved closer still, stepped small but determined. Mommy, Daddy, may I please take a picture with him? Her voice, that particular blend of hope and politeness only children possess. I promise I won't get too close or break any rules. Her mother glanced at her watch, barely concealed anxiety, a gesture I'd seen too many times in hospital waiting rooms. Of course, sweetheart, but remember what the doctor said about not tiring yourself too much. As her father prepared the camera, Emily smoothed her pink dress, clearly chosen especially for this day. She adjusted her beanie with careful fingers. I could see her reflection in the palace windows, the way she tried to stand as straight as possible, despite the effort it clearly cost her. Just like a Real guard, she whispered to herself, attempting to mimic my posture. The effort made her sway slightly, her father's hand instantly reaching out to steady her. And in that moment, something shifted inside me, a feeling I hadn't experienced with such intensity since those critical moments in Afghanistan, when decisions between protocol and humanity had meant the difference between life and death. Through my ceremonial stillness, I felt the weight of every regulation, every rule, every tradition that defined the Queen's Guard. But I also felt something else, something deeper, a more fundamental calling. The very reason I joined the military in the first place, the duty to protect, to serve, to recognize true courage when I saw it. And I was looking at it right in front of me. Emily positioned herself carefully, respectful distance maintained, smile bright despite the paleness. "Daddy, do I look soldier straight?" she asked, trying to hold herself as still as possible, her small frame trembling with the effort. I could hear her breathing, slightly labored but determined. In my years of service, I'd seen countless tourists pose for photos, but never had such a simple act carried such weight. Through my peripheral vision, I saw her parents' expressions, that unique mixture of pride, love, and barely contained heartbreak that only parents of critically ill children seem to master. The crowd was utterly silent, holding its breath. Even the distant city sound seemed muted. The morning sun caught the brass buttons of my uniform, casting little circles of light that danced across Emily's delighted face. And in that moment, I made a decision. Guard Thomas Ashton did something he hadn't done in 15 years of service. I moved. The movement was deliberate, precise, every bit as measured as my ceremonial stillness had been. A collective gasp rose from the crowd as I turned, boots pivoting with military precision, to face Emily directly. Her eyes widened, surprise and wonder. Her small hand instinctively reached for her father's. But I wasn't finished. With the same precision I'd learned in training, I lowered myself to one knee, bringing myself to eye level with this brave little girl who had touched something so deep within my soldier's heart. "Hello, Emily," I said, my voice carrying the kind of gentle authority only years of service can create. "I couldn't help but notice how perfectly you've been standing at attention." Her face that lit up with a joy that seemed to push back the shadows of her illness, if just for a moment. You can talk," she whispered, amazement in her voice. Then, quickly, with endearing formality, "Sir." My white-gloved hand moved to my chest, carefully unpinning one of my medals. "This," I said, holding it out to her, "is for exceptional bravery in the face of difficult conditions." My voice carried the same gravity I'd use in a formal military ceremony. "Something you know quite a bit about, I believe." Emily's mother had covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming down her face. Her father's camera shook as he recorded, his own eyes glistening. Around us, tourists began to cry openly, while others smiled through tears. "May I?" I asked, waiting for Emily's small nod before carefully pinning the medal to her dress. "There. Now you're officially part of the Guard." Emily touched the medal with trembling fingers, pure wonder on her face. But don't you need it?" she asked, showing concern even in her moment of joy. I smiled. The first time, I think, many had ever seen such an expression on a Queen's Guard's face. "I think you've earned it more than I have." I straightened my posture, still on one knee. "Would you like to learn the official salute?" For the next few moments, the crowd watched in absolute, emotional silence as I guided Emily's small hand through the motion. Her face, a study in concentration, despite her obvious fatigue. When she finally executed a perfect salute, a spontaneous round of applause erupted from the onlookers. "Excellent form," I said, my voice both military crisp and gently warm. Then, in a move that drew another gasp, I opened my arms. "Would you do me the honor?" Emily didn't hesitate. She stepped forward into my embrace, her small arms barely reaching around my broad uniform. In that moment, I wasn't just a guard, and she wasn't just a sick child. We were two warriors, recognizing each other's battles. When we finally parted, Emily's eyes were shining brighter than the metal on her dress. I stood to my full height and executed a formal salute, not the kind for tourist photos, the genuine article, reserved for fellow soldiers, for dignitaries of the highest rank. "Thank you," Emily's mother whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea what this means." "Thank you, sir," her father added, his hand gentle on Emily's shoulder. This is more than we ever." I gave them a small nod. Some moments, words are simply not enough. But something had changed, something everyone who witnessed it could sense. The guard stood not just as a symbol of tradition and duty, but as a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies in knowing when to break protocol. For the sake of humanity, as Emily and her parents made their way back through the crowd, tourists parted respectfully, many reaching out to touch her shoulder, offer quiet words of encouragement. The metal gleamed on her pink dress, catching the late morning sun, a permanent reminder that courage comes in many forms, and true guardians protect more than just palaces. The world keeps turning. Duty continues. The guard stands watch. But for one moment, on an ordinary morning at Buckingham Palace, something extraordinary happened. A guardian of tradition and a young warrior fighting her own battle reminded everyone present that while protocol serves a purpose, it's the heart that truly guides us in our finest moments. That if the story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of compassion and courage, then please give this video a like. And if you want to hear more stories of strength and humanity from those who serve, subscribe to our channel. Hit that bell icon so you never miss an upload. Remember, sometimes the greatest acts of duty come from listening to your heart.